Parshas Vayishlach, this is a bit impromptu, but we're trying to make it into something meaningful and worthwhile. So the malachim that Yaakov sent out to find out what Esav's up to come back to Yaakov, and they tell him the famous pasuk, a sort of awesome and scary comment. He's coming here with a force of men, and his apparent intention is to do you harm. So we know that Yaakov took the three possible drachim to combat Doran. He wanted to send him a bribe, which he did, Tefillah, which he davened, and Milchama, he prepared for Milchama in whatever way he possibly could. As we know, Yaakov was a very accomplished warrior. He could do his battle, but Esav was also. And most likely, and unfortunately bring it down, he was just as much afraid of killing Esav as he was afraid of Esav killing him and his family. So he didn't really want to have a war. So he does all of these things, and then they get closer together, and then, as if by magic, it seems like so realistic, it's unreal. He bows down to him, and then Esav comes and gives him a kiss, and all the Mepharshim say, Kemat, he meant it. He gave him a kiss, and he really meant it. How is that shayach? How is this possible? From all of these things, of course, tefillah can accomplish anything. There are a number of stories which are brought down in storybooks, in Parshas Vayishlach, as they say, which illustrate this interesting concept. There are a number of gigantic, when I say gigantic, I mean gigantic personalities from Eretz Yisrael, from the old Yishuv, whom we know nothing about, or next to nothing about. I had the schus to visit the almana of Rav Nachum David Herman, the son of the famous all for the boss Yaakov Yosef Herman, and I mentioned to her that I named one of my children after her husband, Nachum David. So this was after he was nifta. She took me into his library and allowed me to take any sefer I wanted. So I saw the Sfarim there, which were quite interesting. Of course, I was a young man and didn't really fully grasp what opportunities there were. So I chopped a few Sfarim. One of them turned out to be a fascinating book about the old Yishuv Yerushalayim. The sefer is called Haposeach Shar, printed in Eretz Yisrael. Interestingly enough, the author was quite famous, Eliyahu Kitov. It has a number of stories about the Gedolim of approximately 300 years ago, probably 200 or 100 years ago, 150 years ago. One of those people is Rav Nachum Shadikar. There's a street named after him in Yerushalayim. I cannot tell you the entire story. Those of you who have heard it from me before will recognize it, because I have mentioned, I read it inside in Hebrew. It's rather long, and I don't want to burden all of you with listening to it from the beginning to the end, but you're welcome to come here and look at it inside. I'll be happy to do it with you. To make a long story short, there was a moiser, a black belt troublemaker, a difficult, very, very conspiring, I can't think of many good words to say, but he was a Yid man who lived in a little town there in Yerushalayim. His name was Grunshi Getchus. He would steal from the peddlers on the street. He would beat up people for no reason. He was what we would call today a mafioso. Really not a good guy. One time he went so far as to upset the tzaddik of Nachum Shadikar, and he smacked him. Oh, this was taking one's life in one's hands. Make a long story short, he disappeared, this Grunshi Getchus, and they didn't see him for a while. Rav Nachum had to go out of town, either to go to a bris or to some simcha. Took along one of his talmidim, and it was known that he was leaving. And they're traveling outside of town, as they've left town, and they're out in the middle of nowhere, and they see someone's approaching with a bunch of men. And they look closer and closer, and they see his Grunshi Getchus coming with a band of guys. And they're coming closer and closer, and the Talmud warned him, that's Grunshi Getchus, he's coming out, he's out to get you. Rav Nachum Shadikar closed his eyes and sat there very calmly, and just kept his eyes calm, and was obviously concentrating very, very deeply. And then when Grunshi came close, he came And he bowed down to him and he kissed him and he thanked and he apologized for being so mean to him. He was hoping to mend his ways. This was literally a nace. After he left and he got back home, all of his Talmidim asked him, what did you do? What kind of mifus did you pull over here? He says, I did the same thing that Yaakov Avinu did. And what was that? It's a pasuk in Mishlei, and I'm happy I was able to locate that pasuk based on this book. It's in Perek Chav Zayin, pasuk Yud Tes. The pasuk reads, Kimayim haponim laponim, ken lev ha'adam la'adam. Again, Kamayim haponim laponim, ken lev ha'adam la'adam. Just as a person looks at a lake or a pool where the water is absolutely still, and what does he see? He sees his reflection. So too, when we take one person's heart and we approach another person's heart, that person's heart will be a reflection of your heart. Nachum said he did exactly the same thing that Yaakov Avinu did. He forgave Esav with all of his heart for all of the Esav things that he did to him or wanted to do to him. And because the trick is, he meant it. He didn't just say it. He meant it. So Rav Nachum said, I did the same thing. I sat down and worked very hard on bettering myself to say, he probably had a tough childhood. He was abused. All of the things that he did because of other circumstances. But he really is not such a bad guy. And I forgive him with all my heart. And by doing that, he erased any sinner that he had in his heart and reflexively erased the sinner in Grunchi's heart. A fantastic observation. We don't believe in mental telepathy, at least those of us who are not having Ruach HaKodesh. But this Vart tells us that if we approach all people with the attitude that Bidan L'Kaf Schus and find the good in everybody and everything, I'm not including, obviously, those who shoyim that we were trying to eradicate, but certainly between Jews, and believe me, we got to work, all of us, especially me, on Senas Chinam, and those Midos Ra'os, Ben Adam L'Chavero. It's a very good thing to follow this minhag, which I saw every morning before I start davening. I ask Hashem to have an aliyas neshama for all those members of the family that require it, and through the source of my davening, as poor as it may be, that all of those neshamas should have an aliyah, including my dear parents, my dear brother, my dear father-in-law, my dear uncle whom I never met, who I'm named after, Yehonas and Benjamin, and all of the grandparents. And after that, I say this pasuk: Harini mekabel alatzmi mitzvahs aseh shel v'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha. That's from the Arizal. I got that from Rabbi Orbaum. So since I mentioned it in his name, and I said it in his attribution, Mashiach should be coming here any minute. I'll say it again. I'll make you a copy if you want. Harini mekabel alatzmi mitzvahs aseh shel v'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha. That is a fantastic thing to do before davening. It's in some of the very, very big Chassidish Sidorim. You'll see it. And I made copies of that. I put a copy in the car. I put a copy in my siddur. It's not just to say it. It's to do it. If we can do that, we can have things go our way. Not because it's what we want to do, but because we want things to go the right way. Shem Shemayim. And our avodah should be makubal. And in that schus, we should see Yeshus and the Chametz, and Yetz Hashem, all of Yisrael. Kol tov, bye. Okay, the Grunchi Getches story. I couldn't even pronounce his name. Grunchi Getches.